Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to be here in Mauritius for the first and AfricaCERT Symposium. Today's session is dedicated to a challenge I have seen throughout my entire career as both an auditor and a cybersecurity practitioner, the persistent disconnect between conformity assessment and real-world cybersecurity operations. So in this talk, we'll be talking how conformity assessment meets cybersecurity by building a common language between both auditors and analysts. So, my name is Taher ELHOUARI, and I work as an independent information security consultant, a global cyber advisor with around more than 15 years of experience supporting organizations across different regions to build, govern, and defend resilient systems. I wear several hats, an auditor, trainer, GRC expert, and so on. And my work spans like information security, cybersecurity, business continuity, cloud assurance, privacy management systems, and also conformity assessment. I have completed around more than 240 certifications, served as global subject matter expert for multiple organizations, and I have worked hands-on as a VCISO and the CISO senior advisor for both public and private sectors. I also serve as the founding president and chairman of the three nonprofit organizations that I am representing today: the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, the Cloud Security Alliance, and the Conformity Assessment Society Algeria chapters. And I'm also the founder of EKC Group, operating in Algeria, the UK, and the USA. On the international front, I contribute as a subject matter expert for ISC2, Hack the Box, EC Council, and I am also a member of the program committee and planning committee for this AfricaCERT and First Symposium. So across my career, one thing has become very clear. Cybersecurity maturity and operational resilience are not just technical problems, but they are more like governance problems, communication problems, and more importantly, alignment problems. And this leads us directly, without further ado, into the topic of today's session. So, the conference agenda of this talk, now that you know who I am, let me walk you through today's agenda. So, this session is designed to be strategic and immediately usable by both cyber practitioners and also conformity assessment professionals, which we call auditors in general. So, we will begin by exploring the fundamental gap between auditors and analysts and why these two worlds often struggle to communicate and why assurance does not always reflect operational reality. And then we ground ourselves in the foundations of conformity assessment using ISO Casco standards like the ISO 17021 and so on to understand the principles behind audits and so on. And after that, we dive directly into the cybersecurity specific audit ecosystem. Some of them we have the ISO 27006, 7, 8, 35 for cyber operations and more importantly incident handling, and the ISO 1911 for auditing management system. So, and how each of these standards contribute a critical piece of the puzzle. And next, we will try to talk more about integrating technical models such as OWASP, CSA, NIST, and I have a little surprise for you by the end of this session from the AfricaCERT organization in order to show how operational, architectural, and maturity frameworks can unify with audit structures. And then we will build the common language between auditors and analysts, which is the main topic of this talk, translating technical events into audit-ready evidence and transforming audit non-conformities into meaningful operational improvements. And then finally, we close with a forward-looking vision discussing how cybersecurity assurance is shifting from periodic compliance to continuous capability, continuous validation, and integrated cyber governance. So by the end of the session, you will hopefully walk away with a practical and strategic blueprint for unifying these two worlds, the world of conformity assessment and also the world of cyber operations. So let's begin with a simple truth. Auditors and analysts obviously do share the very same mission, which is protecting trust, protecting organizations. So, but their habits, tools, and priorities are somewhat completely different. Because auditors operate on structure, like based on samples, verify, gather evidence, report, and so on. Analysts, on the other way, operate on more like, let's say, adrenaline. So detect, contain, triage, respond, try to penetrate, and so on. And neither of them is wrong. But if these roles do not connect, then organizations will end up with certificates without capability, and also capability without assurance. And this talk is how we fix that, because the challenge is that they protect the same organization, but they do speak different languages. So we need to find the middle common ground in order for them both to collaborate together in order to better protect an organization. So the assurance gap, and this is the core issue. So too many organizations achieve compliance, yet unfortunately they remain very far from secure, because like we all know, there is the golden rule in information security and certifications that certify doesn't mean secure, and because the assurance model and the operational model are disconnected. So as an example, if your SOC or security operations center reduces mttd, the mean time to detect, as an example, but the auditor only checks policy updates, we obviously miss the real progress. And if your auditor finds a non-conformity but analysts do not understand its operational meaning, we obviously miss the opportunity for improvement. And this gap is real. I have seen it in so many cases in different organizations across different countries and regions. And this is really dangerous, because why this gap exists in the first place? Because different evidence structures, different success metrics, different assurance horizons, and most importantly, different languages. And most conflicts arise not from disagreement itself, but from data translation failures. And that's why we standardized our field. And this is the importance of standards, regulations, frameworks, and so on. So when we have this assurance gap, the result is obvious. There is a certain false sense of security and weak assurance that unfortunately does not reflect the reality of our operational aspects. So, the ISO conformity assessment layer, and this is from like a cybersecurity wise side. So, these are the standards that shape the world of auditors. We have ISO 17021, which is the requirements for certification bodies in order for them to certify organizations. In this case, they obtain their accreditation through this standard in order to start operating as a certification body. And then there is the ISO 27006, which is the requirements for ISMS auditing, because the most known international standard for information security and cybersecurity, it is the ISO 27001 for information security management system. And in order for organizations to certify and audit other clients or auditees against the ISO 27001, they need to do that in respect of the requirements of the 27006. But after all that, and the standards, and especially also the 19011, which defines the audit principles and methodologies that we will be talking about in the next slides, all of them, they define competence, impartiality, sampling, evidence, reporting, and so on. And more specifically in our case, we have the 27007 and 27008. And they are especially powerful because the 7 tells us how to audit an ISMS, and the 278 tells us how to assess the control's effectiveness, or the operational side of information security as a whole. And this is the DNA of structured assurance. So ISO already contains assurance wisdom, and what is missing is the operational linkage. So we have also operational cybersecurity layer. We have other standards and other frameworks. So now the world of analysts, it's fast, it's technical, and usually it's threat driven. So OWASP, as an example, or the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, gives application security teams a practical, structured way to validate controls. CSA, on the other hand, for the cloud security assurance, gives cloud teams a control, universe, and continuous assurance. On the other hand, we have the Conformity Assessment Society, or CAS, bridges accreditation and technical cybersecurity. This world is very rich. We also have the NIST of the US, the National Institute for Standards and Technologies. They also have pretty good set of standards and frameworks. So this world is rich, but rarely translated into audit language. And security engineers already generate excellent data, but unfortunately, it remains untranslatable. So, where the gap actually lives, and this is the heart of the problem, because technical teams produce data, auditors require evidence. And unfortunately, in this case, in this exact gap, data doesn't equal evidence unless it is structured, contextualized, traceable, and mapped to an objective. So incidents and improvements often remain invisible to the auditor, and audit findings often feel irrelevant to the analyst. So ISO controls don't map automatically to SOC telemetry as an example. Also, it is not structured for ISO audits. Auditors think in conformity while analysts think in indicators. There is no shared maturity model, and so on and so on. So this is where incidents fall through the cracks in the real world. And then comes the common language. And this is the heart of our session, or the solution that is proposed through this talk. Not by replacing audits, but by transforming them. And this is the model that solves the problem. It gives one shared language regardless of the role, whether you are an analyst or an auditor. And each pillar builds on the previous one. If we adopt this, we can obviously help break the silo. So the unified assurance model that we are proposing in this case is based on the reality that we have seen in the real world, which is based on 5 pillars. Mapping from control to evidence, mapping every single control to evidence. I will be showing some examples in the next slides. Then the metrics translation between operational KPIs and audit criteria that needs to be respected. And then we can do control effectiveness testing by following the guidelines of the ISO 27008 or any other framework you'd love to use. We can also integrate maturity integration in order to measure the maturity level of every single control, process, policy, and so on by using the 3CF that we will be talking about later, which is a major project that we are working on AfricaCERT, or the SOC CMM for SOC operations or others. And obviously, we keep the ISO philosophy in certain way, the Deming wheel, the plan, do, check, act, so continuous development, in this case, continuous assurance loop. And all of this will turn operations into audit-ready evidence, and also at the same time will turn audits into operational improvement drivers. So this is an example from clause to control to evidence. And this is where the translation between governance and operations truly happens. And this slide shows exactly how an abstract compliance requirement, like from the ISO 27002 for the information security controls, we have as an example control A.8.15, event logging or logging, it becomes operationally visible and audit ready. So governance starts with a policy requirement for logging. But that alone means nothing without execution. We need to enforce that policy. So operational teams collect CM events, trigger alerts, create incident tickets, sometimes tune correlation rules, review detection signatures, and generate sometimes weekly detection performance reports. And each of these activities becomes objective evidence when assessed through the ISO 27008, which we'll be talking about in the next slide. So for auditors, this process transforms a vague policy into traceable proof of control effectiveness. And for analysts, on the other hand, it simply formalizes what they already do every day. So monitoring, responding, and refining detections. What changes is not the operational work itself, but the way it is structured and documented. And the same workflow now simultaneously satisfies compliance assurance and strengthens cyber operations. And this is the exact bridge I refer to by converting governance language into operational workflows and then back into audit grade evidence by enabling assurance to move from static periodic checks to continuous validations. And turning the cyber telemetry into audit evidence, in this one, we represent the translation engine of the entire approach that we are trying to vouch for. And that engine is the 27008. It finally offers the industry a formal methodology to rate control effectiveness using real operational evidence instead of subjective judgment or document reviews. So every box on the left side, like CM alerts, playbook execution, incident response ticket, and so on, are live telemetry produced daily by SOC teams. And even CSIRTs too, like computer security incident response teams, or even CERTs, computer emergency response teams. So traditionally, this data stops at the security operations layer and never reaches audit assurance. And the 27008 allows us to converge each of these technical outputs into assessor grade evidence. So CM events become control verification records, playbooks confirm procedural effectiveness, Incident response tickets can demonstrate team competence. Penetration test, as an example, can also act as a controlled stress test. And detection KPIs map directly to measurable risk reduction. And this is what enables the continuous assurance approach. So instead of auditors asking, do you have a control? We can now answer, here is its live performance history. And this standard therefore becomes the missing bridge between cyber telemetry and trusted assurance, enabling capability to be measured, maturity to be proven, and trust to move from assumptions to evidences. So, control effectiveness based on the 27008. This one represents the point where assurance becomes real, because this standard, like we said, gives us the framework to move beyond checking whether policies exist and into evaluating whether controls actually work. And we don't just ask, is a control documented? We ask deeper engineering level questions. As an example, was the control designed correctly to address the risk? Was it implemented as intended? Is it operating continuously, not only when auditors are present? Because yes, ladies and gentlemen, usually we do see this type of cases in the real world. And is it reaching its expected outcomes, such as reducing, as an example, phishing click rates or incident response times? And finally, is the control being continuously tested and improved for maturity evolution and continual improvement? So for an example, an incident response procedure is no longer assessed through document review alone. It is validated via real phishing simulations, playbook execution records, SOC escalation tickets, and post-incident lessons learned. And ISO 27008 allows us to qualify effectiveness using observable operational evidence rather than checkbox attestations. And this is where we transform assurance from the policy exists into the policy works, where controls are measured like engineered systems, not static documents only, which will enable obviously auditors and analysts to finally speak the same performance-based language. And this is what we need nowadays for cyber resilient organizations. So the auditing principles apply to operations, and the auditing principles of the ISO 19011, which provides guidance for usually first and second party management system audits, can be directly applied even inside SOC and incident response operations in SOC teams, CSIRTs, and so on to create continuous operational assurance. An evidence-based approach becomes real-time validation using SOC logs rather than static documents. Audit sampling is applied to incident records and alert datasets. Traceability is enforced across the full ticket lifecycle. Competence requirements are mapped to analyst roles and training records, and objective testing criteria are used to validate playbooks and procedures. And by bringing these principles into daily security operations, SOC environments become self-auditing ecosystems where assurance is continuously generated through validated evidence rather than periodic compliance checks. And a quick case study of audit and SOC alignment. So in this real world scenario, the organization was experiencing recurring phishing incidents while its SOC teams had significantly improved operational performance, most notably reducing the mean time to respond, known as the MTTR, through better detection rules, automation, and response playbooks. However, despite these tangible operational gains, the ISO 27001 or the ISMS audit continued to raise non-conformities related to awareness programs, incident response preparedness, and monitoring effectiveness. And this highlighted the core problem of our session. Operational improvement was not being translated into audit recognizable assurance. And by applying the 27008 assessment principles, we mapped SOC performance metrics such as the MTTR trends, the incident volume reduction, response procedure execution, and so on, directly to relevant audit clauses and control objectives, including policy effectiveness, incident management maturity, and so on. So evidence from ticketing systems, SIEM dashboards, training records, and response playbooks was then structured into objective audit artifacts consistent with the 1911 and the 27007 guidelines. And finally, this aligned evidence set was evaluated through the ISO 27004, which helps you define monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation metrics for specific KPIs inside of your organizational cyber program, whether it's technical or GRC level. So allowing both auditors and analysts to speak a shared assurance language focused on capability rather than just paperwork. And the result was a unified assurance narrative where operational success, audit conclusions, and maturity indicators converged into a single source of truth, building trust between teams while enabling continuous measurable cyber improvement instead of static compliance validation. So the continuous assurance model. This slide represents the evolution of assurance, moving from traditional static point-in-time audits toward continuous assurance driven by real operational data. And instead of waiting for annual audit cycles to discover gaps, SOC telemetry, control dashboards, and real-time risk indicators continuously feed the assurance process. And this is where maturity sparks inside an organization. So dynamic monitoring verifies whether controls remain effective. Evidence is automatically generated from operational workflows, and unified taxonomies ensure the same language is used across security, risk, and audit teams. In this model, annual audits no longer search for problems. They validate the maturity already demonstrated throughout the year, enabling certification and assurance to become maturity-based, risk-focused, and operationally grounded rather than a generic checkbox-driven approach. And this is where the world is going and where Africa can lead, because the future is not more audits, it is smarter assurance systems. And here, ladies and gentlemen, this takes us to the AfricaCERT 3CF, the Common Cybersecurity Controls Framework. And this is a very quick sneak peek into the framework itself, which is being designed as a continental reference framework to unify cyber implementation, assurance, and maturity measurement across Africa. And the objective of 3CF is very simple but powerful at the same time. Enable organizations, regulators, CERTs, auditors, and SOC teams to speak a single control language that works across borders and across standards while remaining aligned with global references such as the ISO 27000 family, the NIST CSF, the CSA, CCM, the OWASP frameworks, and so on and so on. And also national frameworks in mind, of course. So at the heart of the 3CF is a very comprehensive control catalog mapped to strategic areas and domains, enriched with detailed metadata including control categories, control types, security properties, cyber lifecycle mapping, and assessment evidence fields. And each control is assessed using a practical 4-tag maturity logic. Like you can see in the slide, there is the B for baseline or baseline controls that every organization must implement as a bare minimum foundation. C as core controls required for effective operational cyber management. And A for advanced controls reflecting mature threat-driven security programs. And the O for optional strategic controls that apply to specialized or let's say high-risk sectors as an example. So this maturity structure allows assurance to move beyond simple compliance toward progressive capability measurement, benchmarking, and also improvement tracking. And the framework is supported by toolkits that they are still a work in progress, including SOAs or statements of applicability, mapping matrices, maturity assessment tools, and also implementation roadmaps and so on, fully designed to translate operational cybersecurity activities directly into audit-grade assurance outputs. The framework, like I said, is actively under development within the AfricaCERT, where there is a dedicated team for that. And we are working toward releasing its first official edition, hopefully as soon as possible, to support cyber maturity building across the continent, with the ambition of making it the shared backbone of cyber assurance across Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the key takeaways of this session, this one captures the essence of today's message. Auditors and analysts ultimately serve the same mission, protecting organizations, citizens, and critical digital infrastructure. Evidence is the bridge that connects our two worlds, transforming raw operational telemetry into credible assurance. And standards like the 27007 and 8 finally gives us the tools to operationalize audits by linking controls directly to real, let's say, SOC, CSIRT activities and other SecOps activities as a whole. And also frameworks such as OWASP, CSA, and others can generate rich, continuous technical evidence that strengthens assessments instead of replacing them with paperwork. At the continental level, hopefully the AfricaCERT 3CF will be coming out very soon, provides a common maturity language built on its four tags, the BCAO, enabling benchmarking and consistency across borders too. When we combine all of this into a continuous assurance model, compliance stops being once a year event and becomes an ongoing capability. And this is how, ladies and gentlemen, we move from episodic audits to real living cyber assurance, not checks on a certificate, but confidence in our resilience. So, thank you deeply, every single one of you. It has truly been an honor to share this session with such an exceptional community of cyber leaders, auditors, analysts, practitioners, regulators, and governments from across Africa and the Arab region. I hope this talk has helped bridge the worlds of governance, conformity assessment, and also real world cyber operations, and that it has shown how evidence can become the common language that unites us, transforming audits from static checkpoints into living assurance and building continuous trust between strategy and execution at all three levels, whether they are strategic, tactical, or operational. So the future of cybersecurity belongs to a collaboration between CSIRTs, auditors, between standard bodies and practitioners, between regional initiatives like the AfricaCERT and the global community represented here today. Together, we shape a stronger, more resilient digital ecosystem for our organizations, our nations, and our continent too. Thank you again for your attention, and please feel free to ask your questions. I remain available for further discussion and collaboration, and you can also find me on LinkedIn, Taher Amine. Pleased to connect with you. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.